This hearing of the Senate Judiciary Committee will come to order. Today, the committee will hear from witnesses about the alarming level of youth e-cigarette use and examine how federal agencies have failed to enforce the law designed to protect our children from a lifetime of nicotine addiction. Let's turn to a video that shines light on just how addictive these e-cigarettes are to children and why today's hearing is so timely.
You hid your vape underneath your pillows.
Yeah.
And you would come and smoke how often?
Oh, I couldn't go longer than like 10, 15 minutes without hitting it. It was so addicting.
The Surgeon General's warning first appeared on cigarette packages back in 1970. More than 4 decades later, the nation's top doctor is sounding the alarm on e-cigarettes, especially when used by teenagers.
E-cigarettes went from being rare in 2010 to now being the most common tobacco product used by our nation's youth. This represents a staggering development in a relatively short period of time, and it also threatens 50 years of hard-fought progress that we have made curbing tobacco use, and it places a whole new generation at risk for addiction to nicotine.
It took 2 days for my lungs to fail, and I almost died. Asked for like a pen and paper because that was the only way I could communicate. And I wrote, I want to start a no vaping campaign. That was the first thing I did when I opened my eyes.
And the fact that they market this crap to children and they turn it into pink, pretty purple packaging candy pisses me off.
I had a really bad headache. I just felt really sick. It's really hard to believe that that happened, but everyone's told me that one day they just said he has a 10% chance to live. Like I have to take over 20 medications a day, opportunities that I would have had before, like going in the military. I can't do that anymore.
There's a lot we don't know about the both short-term and long-term consequences of vaping, and so I would just say, don't.
That tells us that we're not doing a good enough job at protecting kids.
Cigarettes are responsible for more than 480,000 deaths per year. These deaths touch virtually every family in this country, including my own. This hearing is part of my continued effort in Congress to stop these needless deaths, particularly the addiction of children. We have made progress, and the tobacco giants have fought back. That's why we're here today. In the year 2000, 28% of high school students smoked cigarettes. Thanks to the efforts of Congress and the public health community, that number has declined to only 2%, from 28% to 2% of high school students today. But anyone who thought big tobacco would accept this trend and dissipate like a cloud of smoke was mistaken. Instead, they rebranded and introduced new products known as e-cigarettes. And they follow the same playbook, the exact same playbook they successfully used to drive sales of Marlboro and Camel cigarettes in the earlier years. Target kids. Thanks to the addictive nature of nicotine, these companies knew, they've known a long time, if they could just hook a child at a young age, they had a customer for life. It started with Juul. Backed by $13 billion from tobacco giant Altria in a partnership which the American Heart Association has characterized as a match made in tobacco heaven, I would say tobacco hell. The company introduced flashy devices, kid-friendly flavors, and advertisements featuring young, attractive people. That unleashed a wave of nicotine addiction that then FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb described in 2018 as an epidemic, with more than 5 million teens reported that they were using e-cigarettes. The FDA and the Justice Department has the tools to prevent this epidemic. They have failed to use them. The Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act requires e-cigarette companies to get FDA authorization before bringing products to market. Authorization can only be granted if the companies making the product first prove that their products are, quote, appropriate for the protection of public health, end quote. But for years, under both Democratic and Republican administrations, FDA ignored its responsibility until public health groups actually had to sue the agency to force it to do its job and protect our kids. In that court case, the U.S. District Court in Maryland found that the FDA was in fact violating the Tobacco Control Act and ordered the agency to complete its review of e-cigarette applications by September the 9th, 2021. That was 33 months ago, almost 3 years. FDA still has not completed its review. Almost 3 years later, still has not completed its review. After the court-ordered deadline passed on September 9th, 2021, FDA could have ordered every single unauthorized e-cigarette off the market, and that's what it should have done, and as the law clearly intends. Instead, thousands of unauthorized e-cigarettes flooded the markets. Flavors like Blue Raz Ice, Strawberry Watermelon Bubble Gum, and Cotton Candy, designed and effectively addicting millions of children in America. Let me be clear. Despite claims from Big Tobacco, there is zero evidence that e-cigarettes and their fruity flavors are targeted at adults. None, no evidence. In fact, the rate of e-cigarette use is nearly twice as high for middle school students as it is for adults. Today I'm releasing the findings from an NIH-funded Monitoring the Future study, one of the country's preeminent public health surveys. The researchers there estimate that 2.1 million children have picked up vaping since the Food and Drug Administration missed its September 2021 court-imposed deadline. 2.1 million new children addicted. And that's where the Justice Department is supposed to step in. FDA relies on Department of Justice to bring enforcement actions for violations of the law. Sadly, the Justice Department seems to have followed FDA's lead and has failed to effectively crack down on illegal e-cigarettes. To date, only 23, remember that number, 23 e-cigarette brands have been authorized for sale in the United States. Yet there are more than 6,000 e-cigarette brands on the market today. A trip to any gas station in America, convenience store or vape shop, makes the scope of this illegal market clear. I simply do not understand how the Food and Drug Administration and our Department of Justice have permitted thousands of products to remain on store shelves when their manufacturers have not received authorization or in some cases even filed an application. While these two agencies sit on their hands during both the Trump and Biden administrations, e-cigarette companies addicted a new generation of children to nicotine, erasing the hard work so many of us undertook to convince kids not to smoke tobacco cigarettes and ultimately save their lives. I'd like to thank Ranking Member Graham for working with me on organizing the hearing. Unfortunately, he cannot be with us today, but Senator Tillis from North Carolina will be serving as a ranking member in his place. I now turn to Senator Tillis for opening remarks.
Chairman Durbin, thank you for holding this hearing. We're talking about a serious issue that impacts the youth of our nation, but it also threatens the legal tobacco industry. When the FDA banned legitimate flavored vapes, it opened the doors to cheap Chinese knockoffs that flooded the market. And even though these imported vapes are mostly illegal, there's been little done in the way of enforcement. There's been a 1,500%, a 15-time increase in kid-friendly flavors sold from 2020 to 2023. Among youth who reported e-cigarette use, more than 25% of them used it daily, and over a third used it at least 20 days a month. It's also worth noting that tobacco is my state's oldest industry. North Carolina leads the country in tobacco farming and manufacturing, supporting over 27,000 jobs in the state. Nobody wants kids and teenagers using e-cigarettes, especially illegal and counterfeit products that are being dumped in the U.S. by China's state-controlled tobacco monopoly, which is why I voted in favor of raising the age to purchase tobacco products to 21. While youth e-cigarette use has decreased by 60% since 2019, the peak of 5.3 million, according to the National Youth Tobacco Survey, FDA's lack of guidance, lack of transparency, and lack of enforcement has allowed the CCP and organized crime to flood the U.S. with dangerous, illicit vapes. FDA's refusal to follow congressional intent and implement the Tobacco Control Act has led to disastrous consequences for public health and American jobs. Now, conveniently, 2 days before this hearing, The FDA has announced an interagency task force to tackle this issue that has plagued our country for years. This thinly veiled political stunt comes 2.5 years after the Reagan-Udall Foundation report was released with this very recommendation. If the timing of the task force formation wasn't evidence enough of how unserious the FDA is about tackling the flood of illicit e-cigarettes in the U.S., FDA's exclusion of CBP from the task force makes it crystal clear. The FDA cannot create a functioning market of regulated tobacco products through fines and warning letters alone. The FDA must create a consistent, transparent, science-based review process for reviewing applications for new tobacco products. FDA's current process is broken. The FDA has currently 560,000 pending applications, including more than 557,000 for e-cigarettes. To date, the FDA has only approved 0.001% of all e-cigarette applications it has received. In fact, it's been more than 2 years since the FDA authorized a new product. And the Center for Tobacco Products has never authorized a new e-cigarette product under Director King's leadership. The result of FDA's de facto ban on regulated, reduced-risk alternatives for adult smokers is exactly what has caused the convening of this committee today. The youth vaping epidemic and the lack of enforcement against illegal cigarettes. Furthermore, it's worth mentioning today that there is also a plague of illicit counterfeit THC vape products entering the U.S. Much of this is related to Chinese imports, and many of the health problems often associated with vaping actually stems from fake, dirty THC vapes that contain dangerous additives. We now see the Eastern Band of the Cherokee has decided to start selling THC-based products in western North Carolina because they're within their sovereign territory. I have no doubt that they are probably putting something on the shelf that people think are safe, that are THC-based products that the behavioral health profession says is becoming one of the leading causes of psychotic events, these supposedly legal products that you can buy in North Carolina where THC products are not allowed, technically allowed. So I look forward to a robust conversation today, and maybe we can get to a point to where we can bend the curve on and hold anyone out to dry, quite frankly, if we find evidence that they are marketing to our nation's youth. This is a major public health threat. It's a major threat that I think is being perpetrated in large part by China. And Mr. Chair, I appreciate you convening the hearing today so that we can air it.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. I'm glad that we have a bipartisan motivation to meet today and get to the bottom of this. Today's hearing includes 2 panels of witnesses. Before I introduce the first panel, let me briefly lay out the mechanics. After I introduce and swear in the first panel, each will have 5 minutes to provide opening statements. Then there's a round of questions from the senators. Each senator will have 5 minutes. Ask them to please remain as close as possible to their allotted time. Then we'll turn to a second panel. After I introduce and swear them in, they'll each have 5 minutes themselves. I'll introduce the first panel now. On the first panel, we will hear from Dr. Brian King, who serves as director of the Center for Tobacco Products at the Food and Drug Administration, and Arun Rue, who serves as Deputy Assistant Attorney General of the Consumer Protection Branch in the Civil Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Could the witnesses please stand to be sworn in? Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that both of the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. I now give you an opportunity for an opening statement. Dr. King, please proceed.
Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Tillis, and members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to discuss FDA's efforts to address unauthorized e-cigarettes. This morning, I'd like to provide an update on how FDA is working in collaboration with our federal partners on this critically important public health issue. Now, the bad news is that e-cigarettes have been the most commonly used tobacco product among our nation's youth since 2014. But the good news is that there's been more than a 60% decline in the number of middle and high school students using e-cigarettes over the past 5 years, including 580,000 fewer high school students in 2023 alone. But despite this progress, more work is definitely needed. And for FDA's part, we're employing a comprehensive enforcement approach in addition to other activities.
Dr. King, could you bring the microphone just a little closer?
Is that better?
Yes,
Great.
yes. Thank you.
And I want to reinforce that we cannot do this alone. An all-government approach across the supply chain is critical. With that goal in mind, FDA has been actively working with colleagues across the federal government, including the Department of Justice, Customs and Border Protection, the Federal Trade Commission, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. And for FDA's part, I'd like to highlight some important actions that we've taken to address unauthorized e-cigarettes. At the manufacturer and distributor level, we've conducted thousands of inspections, resulting in nearly 900 warning letters. And at the retailer level, we've issued over 550 warning letters. Many recipients heed warning letters and take corrective actions, but if they don't, we can escalate. And we've made important strides in this space, including several first-of-their-kind actions over the past 2 years. For example, we've built cases to support the first injunctions against e-cigarette manufacturers and distributors in coordination with DOJ, which now number 8 complaints filed. We've conducted the first seizure of an e-cigarette distributor in coordination with DOJ and the U.S. Marshals Service. We've issued the first civil money penalties against e-cigarette manufacturers, which now number nearly 60. And at the retailer level, we've issued the first civil money penalties for sales of illegal e-cigarettes, which now number more than 100. And on imports, we participated in a landmark joint operation with Customs and Border Protection, resulting in the seizure of more than $18 million worth of unauthorized e-cigarettes. And this work is in addition to our robust program to prevent underage sales, for which we've conducted nearly 1.5 million inspections, resulting in 138,000 warning letters, 33,000 civil money penalties, and 200 no tobacco sale orders for a variety of tobacco products. Now, I want to assure you that FDA is committed to taking more of these escalated enforcement actions in conjunction with our federal partners, but the road to get there is complicated by several factors. FDA has received nearly 27 million pre-market applications for e-cigarettes, which we are required by law to review. This, combined with the rapidly evolving tobacco product landscape, presents an unprecedented time and resource challenge that no other center at FDA has ever faced. There's also an inequity in resources. We are 100% funded by user fees, which have not been updated to reflect the realities of the tobacco product marketplace. We need Congress's support to address this inequity, which we've included in the agency's fiscal year 25 budget proposal. First, we seek authorization for FDA to collect user fees from e-cigarette manufacturers, all of whom are currently paying no fees, to increase the current collections by $114 million to account for the increased workload, and to index all future collections for inflation. Second, we seek to extend the agile hiring authorities of the 21st Century's Cures Act to our center to improve our ability to recruit, to hire, and to retain personnel. We're the only FDA center without such authority. So in conclusion, FDA has taken important strides to address unauthorized e-cigarettes, especially recently, but we acknowledge there's more to do. And guided by our new 5-year strategic plan, I'm confident that with congressional support, our critical all-government approach will help us to achieve our shared goals of removing unauthorized e-cigarettes from the marketplace and, critically importantly, keeping these products out of the hands of our nation's youth. We stand ready to partner with our federal colleagues, including Congress, to explore additional opportunities to optimize that enforcement, including the ability to better identify and prevent the importation of unauthorized tobacco products. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Dr. King. Mr. Rao?
Good morning, Chair Durbin, Senator Tillis, and members of the committee.
Pull the microphone as close as you can.
Certainly. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
My name is Arun Rao, and I am the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Division's Consumer Protection Branch. There is an urgent need to combat the illegal distribution and sale of unauthorized electronic nicotine delivery systems, or e-cigarettes, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. Safeguarding the well-being of our nation's youth is a paramount concern for the department, especially in this area. Illegal e-cigarettes are a significant public health risk to Americans. They contribute to addiction and health issues, and they pose a dire threat to youth who are often the primary targets of aggressive marketing campaigns. As you are aware, illegal e-cigarettes have flooded our nation. Many of these products originated from abroad, and in particular from China. Tens of millions of e-cigarette applications have been filed with FDA for authorization. Many manufacturers have exploited the pre-market authorization process. For example, some have tried to evade FDA denial orders by making minimal alterations to previously denied products and then filing another application with FDA. Some overseas manufacturers routinely misdeclare shipments at port of entry to evade import alerts. And retailers across the country continue to manufacture their own products in individual stores. Taken together, these factors have made illegal e-cigarettes all too accessible, allowing young people to obtain them at brick-and-mortar retailers across the country and online. The Justice Department performs an important role in supporting the FDA's efforts to ensure that illegal e-cigarettes stay off the market. When manufacturers challenge FDA orders denying their marketing applications, the Civil Division defends the FDA's decisions in court. We've defended the FDA in over 80 legal challenges filed by manufacturers. While many of those matters have yet to be decided, we have prevailed in more than a dozen cases, including in unanimous decisions in 7 courts of appeal. In a case in which we have received a significant adverse decision in the Fifth Circuit, the Department is seeking review from the Supreme Court. The Department also plays an important role in enforcing the Tobacco Control Act. For example, the FDA has pursued monetary penalties against over 55 manufacturers and 100 retailers and has sent warning letters to hundreds more. Although the Department cannot impose penalties itself, we are prepared to assist the FDA in collection actions to ensure compliance. Additionally, we have partnered with the FDA in significant enforcement actions. This includes the first domestic seizure of unauthorized e-cigarettes, which included more than 45,000 illegal e-cigarettes. We also have the authority to bring civil injunction actions in matters referred to the Department by the FDA. These actions do not allow us to recover monetary penalties, limiting their deterrent effect in some circumstances, but they are an important tool in appropriate cases. The Department has secured injunctions against 6 entities, continues to litigate against another, and just yesterday filed a proposed consent decree in our most recent case. We stand ready to act on additional referrals in consultation with the FDA. We recognize that illegal distribution and sale of e-cigarettes is a complex and evolving problem that poses a grave threat to public health and safety. It demands urgency. While some progress has been made, there is still much work ahead of us. That is why earlier this week, the Department and FDA announced the creation of a multi-agency task force with the sole purpose of addressing the threat posed by the sale of illegal e-cigarettes. The task force combines the expertise of multiple law enforcement partners, including ATF, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the U.S. Marshals Service, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, as well as the Federal Trade Commission, to help combat this problem through comprehensive enforcement strategies. From seizing unlawful products to pursuing criminal investigations and prosecutions under the Prevent All Cigarette Trafficking Act, or the PACT Act, we will use every tool available to bolster our efforts to halt the illegal sale of unauthorized e-cigarettes. We also stand ready to work with Congress in its legislative efforts to address this important issue. Congress has an important role to play to ensure that the Department and FDA are able to effectively pursue critical enforcement actions. In closing, I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to testify. I am confident that working together, we will make additional progress in the fight against the illegal sale of unauthorized e-cigarettes and will safeguard the well-being of all Americans, and especially our youth. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rao. I'll ask a few questions. I'm going to make a statement which I hope you'll both listen to carefully. Under the Tobacco Control Act, a manufacturer has the burden of proving to the FDA that its e-cigarette is, quote, appropriate for the protection of the public health, end quote, before it can enter the market. In other words, unless the manufacturer meets its burden and the FDA authorizes the product, it is illegal for that e-cigarette to be sold in the United States. Dr. King, Mr. Rao, is everything I've said so far accurate?
Yes, correct.
Yes.
To date, the FDA has authorized 23 e-cigarette brands, and no flavored cigarettes have been authorized by the FDA. Take a look at this photo. It was taken by my staff just a few days ago at a vape shop less than 1 mile removed from the FDA's headquarters. It shows Fat Boys, Red Bull, Strawberry Vape, and V-Hose Dragon Fruit Watermelon Vapes. Right here is this so-called Elf Bar watermelon bubblegum vape purchased from that store less than 1 mile away from the FDA headquarters. Not a single one of these products has been authorized by the FDA. None of them. These illegal products, clearly designed for kids by their flavors, are being sold in FDA's shadow of their building headquarters, less than a mile from your headquarters. How is that allowed to happen, Dr. King?
I'll reinforce that we do have a pre-market paradigm for reviewing applications, and the sheer volume of the volume of those applications and the volume of the market requires us to prioritize our enforcement efforts.
That's what I really want to get to here. So you're saying that if they're burden of proof on the manufacturer under the law, they have to prove appropriate for public health before they will be approved by the FDA. That proof is not made, and yet these products are going for sale. You've completely fallen down on the job. Your responsibility is to impose the burden of proof and not allow the sale of these e-vape cigarettes to kids unless they are approved by the FDA, correct?
Correct.
So let's hear the answer.
I'll
Why are you doing
reinforce
this?
that the sheer volume of this product landscape requires time to ensure that we conduct scientifically defensible and legally defensible reviews of the 27 million
That's
applications.
not your burden. It's their burden. They have to prove they're appropriate for public health. You don't have to disprove it.
I'll reinforce that the applications are substantial, and we have hundreds of scientists that are working on a daily basis to review these applications, and we've made good progress. We're 99%
So if I make a filing,
through.
if I file legal briefs thick enough, I can go ahead and sell my product without approval.
No, that's not accurate, but we want to make sure we review the science that's submitted. And so there are some applications that don't meet the initial bar. There's 3 phases of review, and we can remove those applications earlier if they don't have the necessary information. But if they provide enough science for us to do a substantive review, we have to take the time to scientifically review them, and that does take time.
Mr. Rao, are these tobacco company lawyers beating you to death to the point where you don't enforce the law as it is written and I described it? Please use your microphone.
Senator, this is obviously a very litigious environment. We have been actively defending the FDA in courts of appeal and district courts across the
33
country.
months. 33 months since the Maryland court said you were required through the FDA to get your job done, and nothing has happened.
Senator,
You call this an urgent need. What is urgent about waiting almost 3 years and doing nothing?
Senator, we share your concerns with respect to the widespread prevalence of these illegal products, and we take seriously our obligations to enforce aggressively in this space.
I assume you're an attorney, are you not?
That's correct.
What does it mean when we say burden of proof?
What needs to be established in a court?
Who has the responsibility of proving the safety of this product now under American law?
In this case, it would be the manufacturers.
Have they proven it with all these?
I do not believe that's the case. No, they have not.
So what should we do as a nation to say to them, you cannot, in this situation, openly defy the law and the agencies and sell your product anyway to children?
Senator,
What is it we should do to stop them?
Senator, I think we should signal aggressive aggressive enforcement in this space is a priority across the executive branch. I think we should send that signal. I appreciate the opportunity to lift up.
I'm sorry. I'm against signals. Do something. To announce 7 days before this hearing that you're going to have real law enforcement now get involved in this. What in the hell have you been waiting for?
Senator, we have been acting on a number of fronts. There's been the civil monetary penalty actions that Dr. King referred to earlier, and the department stands ready to assist in collection actions in those matters. We have been working with the U.S. Marshal Service and the FDA on seizures.
You're failing. You're failing within a mile of the FDA headquarters. Is evidence that you're failing. What's serious about this is not only the failure of the attorneys, but the failure that is leading to addiction of children.
Senator, this is a multi-pronged approach. That's what's going to be required in this case. And again, that's why we're working with multiple law enforcement partners, not just the FDA, but also the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, U.S. Postal Inspection Service. We have had ongoing engagement with those agencies, looking at potential additional enforcement actions, both criminal and civil, that we can take using other authorities. and we are optimistic that working with these partners, we're going to be able to make progress.
Well, it's been quite a few years since I finished my law school courses, but I do believe I understand burden of proof. They have the burden of proof. They have failed to meet it and sell their product regardless. Our government, Department of Justice, and FDA stand by and say, this is too complicated. It's not complicated, it's basic. If they have the burden of proof and haven't met that, they are violating the law, correct?
Correct.
Enough said. Senator Tillis.
Mr. Rao, I'm not an attorney, so I have a habit of asking questions I don't know the answer to. And this is one that I'm curious, if you take a look at the shelves that are full there, you could leave this hearing, or you could view this hearing through a lens of attacking big tobacco and taking advantage of the youth population and try to get them addicted to nicotine. But it seems to me that a lot of these products that were up there are not being dumped on the market by big tobacco. Am I wrong?
Senator, the market is, there are a number of players in the market, not just the large
Well, let me just ask, we never totally solve problems here. That's why we've been coming back every year for several hundred years to try and get things right in this country. But if you really wanted to take a big chunk out of the danger that our youth faces today, would it be double down on big tobacco or in this?
Senator,
if you actually pull that whole box forward, I think that's what
Thank
they're
you.
struggling with.
Okay. How about now? Senator, I think given the complexity of the market, I think you have to take a multi-pronged approach. We have to use all available
I get
tools.
all that. I get all that. But if you're in a world, we've heard Mr. King say that the FDA is stretched for resources. I think fee structures probably should be modernized. That's not going to happen overnight. So if you can only focus on one area that would have the biggest return, I'm just asking between big tobacco, which has been characterized as one of the lead causes of this problem, or what's being dumped substantially from China, which of the two would you try to solve first?
Senator, we would work with the FDA on determining the most effective use of our resources.
Well, Mr. King, let me move to you. I'm assuming a lot of these applications you're being flooded with, are they from the normal players? Or are they from other players that are dumping products in the market?
It's all of the above.
But give me some rough idea of stratification in terms of numbers, the sources.
So in terms of the big players, we do receive applications, but we also receive from small entities as well, including small manufacturers, mom and pop shops and vape shops are submitting applications
Between the two of them,
as
just
well.
intuitively, Mr. King, which of the two do you think would be more risky in terms of what's in the product? A big tobacco company that's a perennial target, or mom and pop shops and import? Just intuitively, which of the two do you think would represent the most dangerous product?
It's dependent upon the information that's supplied in the application to us on the science, and I cannot make a sweeping generalization because
there's no
marked
way.
variability.
So you think that products that have been researched, that are going through an industry that's been heavily regulated, are likely to be as dangerous as products that are being dumped from companies that are manufacturing it in China?
Again, I can't speak in broad generalizations, but there are variability within these products. It's a diverse landscape of different products with different device types. And so making those generalizations is not consistent with the available scientific evidence.
No, actually, I just think it's fascinating that we haven't done the work to understand that, because you're not going to solve the whole problem. And it would seem to me that it would be useful to actually figure out, if you were able to reduce the risk in one sector, then you would have some idea of where the most dangerous products are and how they're systematically coming to market. But apparently that's not a factor, and I'm not going to go any further on that question. Why 2 years after the report are we just hearing about this task force, after the report recommendation?
We've been working systematically since the release of the Reagan-Udall evaluation to address all 15 recommendations. And I publicly said I welcome the evaluation that is accurate, and we've worked diligently to implement all of them, including this. But it's a variety of different actions. We've made progress. We're reporting quarterly on that progress. And on the task force, it's multi-agency, and that takes time to make sure we get the right folks to the table and we set the foundation for more progress.
On the point that you're, and I'm just trying to give you an opportunity to explain this, Senator Durbin has mentioned that you have responded to Senator Durbin's questions that you have to review every application. And so are we saying that right now we're in a posture where these products are given the benefit of the doubt pending review?
No, there's no safe harbor for simply submitting an
Senator Durbin
application.
just said yes, so I'm just trying to make the connection because I'm trying to understand why you think you have to do the science, and I don't think you're suggesting that because they have they've applied that they can sell the market until they've been disproven. Is that accurate?
There is no safe harbor by simply submitting an application. Anyone who does not have authorization through the appropriate PMTA pathway or other pathways is on the market.
Okay, so just to be clear, if I can rob Senator Durbin, what the hell are we talking about here then? Is this legal? Is it illegal? Is it subject to review and approval of an application? I'm sorry to go over, Senator Durbin, but I'm trying to get an answer to your question, actually.
I can't go through every single product on that chart, but I will tell you that it's
the point here is this is a shelf full of potentially dangerous substances in a store in the shadow of the FDA building. I'm just trying to figure out if any of this is illegal or how in the hell it's legal. I mean, why? I mean, that seems like a legitimate question, right? Okay.
I'm happy to answer.
So,
if I have.
I mean, maybe we should go to the audience. I'm just trying to get an answer. That I'm trying to understand why this is happening in North Carolina. I just don't understand it.
Yeah,
but
no, I'd appreciate the opportunity to
I'll come back for a second round of
respond.
questions. You know, I do want to back up, though, and understand that I would much prefer, I used to dip tobacco, and then I went to a nicotine pouch substance. And last September, when the sales went off, I told myself I was going to quit cold turkey, and I got off of nicotine. Now, I had that option to get off tobacco, that some people could throw a baby out with the bathwater and not have that even for adult. This is something that lets people move off of the cancer-causing substances in tobacco into something safer, and then ultimately, maybe for somebody like me, just quit. So I hope as we're having this discussion that we recognize if we take this stuff off the market, then people are not going to say, well, nicotine's not available anymore, I guess I'll just stop. They're going to go back to a more harmful substance, and we need to make sure that baby doesn't get thrown out with the bathwater.
Senator, the only thing I'll add is when you start advertising flavor watermelon bubble gum, you're not talking about adults making conscious choices.
But I'm not aware of any, is there any big tobacco company that has child flavors on the market today?
Yes.
And what are they?
There's a variety. We know that kids use fruit and candy flavored products as well as mint and other flavors, and there are several big tobacco entities that are manufacturing e-cigarettes with flavors that have been documented to appeal to kids.
Senator Booker?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. Everybody on this panel knows the horrors of fentanyl analogs coming from China, flowing into our streets and doing untold harm and danger and death, causing untold harm, danger, and death to Americans. And it is something that in bipartisan ways we've tried to find ways of stopping that. What is stunning to me about this business is as much as focus is on American companies, there are all of these products coming from other nations that do not have the same levels of scrutiny, and I believe don't have the kind of safety precautions that are critically necessary. Could you talk to me a little bit about the products that are being sold in our stores and corner grocery stores and bodegas that come from other countries and the risks that they pose to American citizens? Please.
I'm happy to answer. Yeah, so we know e-cigarettes as a general product class have lower risk than conventional cigarettes, but that does not mean that they're safe. We know the levels of toxicants are markedly lower, but we know that the aerosol can contain harmful and potentially harmful constituents, but it's a vast marketplace and there's marked variability across product types and brands.
But be specific, some of these products that are coming from other countries like China, do they pose a threat? Could they pose a threat?
I would say that any of the products, regardless of whether they're coming from China or not, could, and that's why we have a pre-market paradigm to review the scientific evidence, to understand what is in the product itself, and to make a determination based on the science whether they meet the appropriate statute by law.
And so the safeguards and regulations I would imagine are being subverted, though, by these knockoffs that are often coming in from other countries. Is that correct?
Yes, other countries and also domestically as well. And the sheer volume of the marketplace is a key challenge in this issue. And that's why I believe strongly that an all-government approach is key. And we're making progress getting the applications done, ramping up enforcement. We need more resources and we need more people at the table.
And so that's a really important point that I want to flesh out a little bit more. In other words, there could be products coming into our market from other nations that pose a threat to Americans, that are flooding our market in many ways. But the challenge we have is the resources to do the kind of law enforcement work that could stop some of these knockoffs coming in. Is that what you're saying?
I agree. People and dollars, resources, correct.
Right. And the products that are being marketed at a time where we are focused so much on, again, as I think we should be, on the safety of the products that are coming through American companies. Is there, when you talk about law enforcement, it's not just here. Could more be done at the point of the source of some of these products coming from other nations?
It could be, but our current authorities are once the products reach the border. We are working on some rules, specifically rulemaking around registration and listing, which would allow us to engage further with international manufacturers, particularly China, where the bulk of these products are coming from. But ultimately, one of our inhibitors is being able to act, once it hits the border, which we are doing. But again, if we had more resources and with the all-government approach, we can do a heck of a lot more.
All right. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Senator Cornyn.
So from 2020 to 2023, 18.4 million vaping products were sold per month in September 2023. There's been a 1,500% increase in kid-friendly flavors sold from 2020 to 2023. My staff happened to stop by an Exxon station and pick up a couple of examples of those products, one called True Story. This one happens to be watermelon bubble gum flavored. This one is called Tyson Heavyweight. That is a apple melon berry. Dr. King, those are clearly designed for consumption by children, correct?
I can't speak to the intent of the manufacturer, but I can say that flavors do appeal to kids. 90% of youth who use e-cigarettes use flavored varieties.
And if you look at the warnings on these products, it said this product can expose you to nicotine, which is an addictive substance, correct, Dr. King?
A highly addictive drug.
Highly addictive drug, known by the state of California to cause birth defects or other reproductive harm. This Tyson's Melonberry warning says it can cause cancer. So let me just ask you, are any of these products safe to consume?
There's no e-cigarette that is safe. They have lower risk.
So there's no e-cigarette that's safe at all. Now, I realize the argument is that for people who are trying to wean themselves, let's say from tobacco, some adults find some of these products, maybe not these products, but some other products useful to wean themselves. Because as I understand, the two biggest problems with smoking a cigarette, for example, is the products of combustion and the nicotine, the products of combustion associated with cancer, according to the Surgeon General. And of course, if you're vaping and not smoking, then really nicotine, which is this addictive substance, is the problem. So interestingly, both of these products say, for sale in the United States only, designed in the USA, made in China. Same thing for the True Story, the watermelon bubble gum vaping device, manufactured in China. Sale only allowed in the United States. To your knowledge, are these products available for sale in China?
I can't speak to if there is evading of the law, but the government of China currently has a law that prohibits the sale of flavored e-cigarettes.
So China you can't sell them in China, but you can sell them in the United States and essentially victimize and addict our children to these nicotine delivery devices, which that's what they are, aren't they?
They are nicotine delivery devices, that is
Nicotine delivery device, a device designed and sold to deliver an addictive substance called nicotine, as well as other associated health risks. Let me just walk you through briefly the FDA approval issues involving an American company, Juul. About a year ago, the Center for Tobacco Products issued a marketing denial order, meant that Juul wasn't able to sell its products, but it filed suit. During the litigation, the marketing denial order was stayed and Juul was able to continue to legally sell its products. Last week, the Center for Tobacco Products rescinded its denial, which sounds like good news for Juul. But my understanding is the rescission of this order moves Juul from back to pending, neither approved nor denied, which means it's no longer able to sell its products. So we have a situation where the FDA denied Juul, during which Juul's e-cigarettes were legal. Then the FDA rescinded its denial, and now Juul e-cigarettes are illegal. Dr. King, this strikes me as a Kafkaesque situation for an American company filing for approval and then finding themselves in this maze of regulation and litigation. Meanwhile, illegal Chinese vapes make $3 billion a year advertising directly to American citizens. Is that accurate? Is what I said accurate?
In general, yes.
Thank you. Seems to me that we need some legislation. I've got some that I tend to work on with my colleagues here, Mr. Chairman, to try to address this problem more directly, and look forward to coming up with a legislative response to what is an outrageous and unacceptable status quo.
I look forward to working with you, Senator. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Rao, Dr. King, no flavored vape or e-cigarette products are currently FDA approved. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, tobacco is a flavor, so no non-tobacco flavored e-cigarettes have been authorized.
No non-tobacco flavored e-cigarettes, therefore other flavors have been authorized. And under the TCA, is it correct, Mr. Rao, that they are therefore not legal to sell in the United States?
That's correct.
And yet they're widely sold in the United States?
That's correct.
Why?
Senator, as we have discussed, it's a complex issue in terms of the legal landscape. We are taking enforcement efforts on a number of vectors to try to address the problem. Principally, the department has been engaged in defense of the FDA's marketing denial orders in district courts and courts of appeal across the country. That has been more than 80 cases to date, and we've prevailed in a dozen of those. In addition, we are working with the FDA and the U.S. Marshal Services on domestic seizures. There was a seizure earlier this year in Southern California in which 45,000 illegal cigarettes were seized. That's part of what we're doing to try to combat this problem. We recognize that there's more that can be done. We have brought a number of civil injunctive actions as well. But we, as part of this task force that has been previously mentioned, we are looking to engage with law enforcement partners across the executive branch to do more in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. So none of the non-tobacco flavors, the flavors that are clearly, in my view, meant to appeal to kids, are FDA approved. None of them are legal to sell in the United States. Flavored products are still widespread in our communities. In Georgia, a 2019 study found that 1 in 5 high school students had vaped, often drawn in by flavors and bright packaging. And because the products that some students are accessing are unregulated and illegal, they're sometimes laced with other drugs. or contaminants. Last March in Lee County in southwest Georgia, a student was hospitalized after using a vape reportedly laced with THC and fentanyl. And a 13-year-old in Whitfield County, Georgia, suffered a stroke and paralysis after reportedly using a brightly colored blueberry raspberry vape. The toxicology report was positive for THC and PCP. How will the department prioritize enforcement aimed specifically at those products that are contaminated or which contain other deadly and illegal drugs?
Senator, it's the highest priority for the department. We share your concerns regarding the health risks with respect to vaping products that may contain additional dangerous products, products, again, that often originate in China. The department has brought criminal actions against individuals involved in the importation of counterfeit vaping-related items, and we would look forward, again, to working with the task force to bring more such actions going forward.
Mr. Rao, what's your candid message for Georgia families right now who fear that their middle school or high school student may unintentionally and inadvertently vape and consume something like fentanyl or PCP?
I want to send the message that the executive branch is taking a very aggressive approach to trying to combat this problem, using all available tools and working closely with law enforcement partners to consider all potential avenues for enforcement against this threat.
What does it look like to work with, for example, local law enforcement agencies in Georgia to make sure that there's not fentanyl in e-cigarettes and vape products that are being marketed to children?
Certainly the department and other law enforcement partners would appreciate the opportunity to engage with local law enforcement, which has...
Are you doing it yet?
It's certainly something that our law enforcement partners are constantly considering in terms of a potential option and are always open to that.
Considering, but so it's not a trick question, just so I understand, so that I can be helpful in connecting your team with the right local law enforcement agencies in Georgia. Are you currently working directly with local law enforcement agencies to identify, for example, fentanyl-laced vape pens in Georgia or elsewhere in the country? Is that something that my office can help facilitate, that liaison between you and local law enforcement in Georgia?
Yeah, it's certainly something that we would welcome facilitation on. I want to be sure that I'm providing correct information and connecting you with the right people. Again, I know our law enforcement partners constantly work with local law enforcement in all of their matters and would welcome engagement from law enforcement partners in Georgia to combat this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. Thank you, Dr. King.
Thanks, Senator Ossoff. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we appreciate you all being here. Dr. King, I want to come to you first. And Senator Booker was asking about the China-produced products that are coming into our supply chain and the lack of verification around those. And you kind of skirted that issue a little bit. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to submit in writing to us. What is that pre-market paradigm? What is that third-party verification that you all are using to make certain that tainted products and illegal products are not in this stream? Because you've not wanted to answer that question fully. Also, when you saw Senator Durbin's chart that Senator Tillis held up, you couldn't say if things were being safe harbored. So let's get some clarification around that so that we understand the extent of the problem that we're dealing with. And you can just submit that in writing for the record. That would be helpful. I also want to ask you, Dr. King, about the role that social media is playing in this epidemic and see what you are doing to address that. We know that TikTok, Instagram are being used to market these illegal fruit and dessert flavored e-cigarettes to children. And any of us can go into any market or any of these vape stores that are in our states, and we see what is happening there. So I would think that one of the central tenets and activities of the task force work should be looking at how social media is being used to promote and to leverage these products into the marketplace to children? Are you focused on social media's role?
So I'll say that we have authority over manufacturing, marketing, and sale. We do not have authority to take action against individuals. But if that influencer is connected to a manufacturer, we can take action. We have issued warning letters in the past, and I will note that Federal Trade Commission will be on this interagency task force, and they have key authorities in that space that will be useful as part of a coordinated approach.
Okay, so you issue warning letters. So then are you turning those entities over to DOJ so that they can be a part of this? Are you turning them over to FTC so that they can go after penalties and enforcement?
So we regularly engage with all of those agencies even before the task force, but it depends on the merits of the case. And so if the case warrants it after the warning letters, we have escalated.
How many have you turned over and how many have been penalized?
So are you speaking with regard to influencers specifically or any
Yes.
enforcement action against any entity?
Influencers. Social media is what we're discussing.
Yes, so depending on the action, that would be more appropriate through the Federal Trade Commission, not the FDA.
Yes, I said DOJ or the FTC. How many have been shut down? See, this is a part of the problem. It is if you're talking in circles and we can't figure out what you're doing to actually stem the flow of these products and to bring people to account and to hold them responsible for what they are doing. And if you're issuing warning letters and somebody gets that, but they know that DOJ and FTC is not going to execute any type of accountability on them, then they're going to delete that email warning or they're going to crumple that letter and throw it in the trash.
I will reinforce that a majority of those who receive warning letters do heed and correct the violative actions, and we have escalated our actions. In the past 2 years alone, we've issued the first injunctions against manufacturers, the first civil money penalties against manufacturers, the first civil money penalties against retailers. We definitely need more, I completely agree, but we need an all-government approach, and I'm hopeful the task force will get us there. But we've set a solid foundation to move forward further.
Okay, and Mr. Rao, coming to you, what about the new task force? Are you planning to use civil and criminal penalties?
We are exploring all tools, Senator, both civil and criminal.
Okay, so my time is running out. So you're exploring, but this is an issue that's kind of gotten away from you all, and you've been slow to respond. And I think it's disappointing to hear you kind of talk in circles about what you are planning to do, but you haven't established a plan and you're not certain what your way forward is going to be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Blackburn. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to you for joining us today. Let me start off by saying that teen vaping is a problem. It's a problem that our society needs to address. Those who try to get kids hooked on nicotine should be ashamed of themselves. Studies have shown that the use of e-cigarettes can easily transition to marijuana and other drugs, especially among these younger users. My concern here is that the federal government has said that it wants to be tough on tobacco, and in saying that, it's issued a bunch of regulations for legal approval, only then to sit on those applications for legal products in the U.S., produced by U.S. companies, while turning a blind eye to illegal Chinese imports. Small businesses selling products are left with little to no guidance as to what's legal and what's illicit. And this is bad, and it's led to more teen vaping. The FDA is publicly committed to clearing the backlog of pending product applications by June 30th of this year. Many of these applications have been pending for several years, even though the deadline set by statute is 180 days. June 30th is in less than 18 days. I wonder, I question, but I question whether they can get that done by the June 30th deadline. I hope they can. But it makes me wonder why it's taken this long. Look, if we're going to establish a Byzantine labyrinth of federal regulations to make it more difficult to do this stuff, then for heaven's sakes, at least make the regime work. The worst thing you can do is set those up so as to choke out U.S. producers who are trying to comply with the law, and then open the floodgates so that the illegal Chinese products can move in and be sold unabated. So I wonder about this backlog, and I think the backlog is a significant problem. Now, between 2019 and 2020, there was a 1,000% increase in high school students' use of disposable e-cigarettes. That's a very significant jump, and most of these e-cigarettes are illegal flavored e-cigarettes from China aimed at children. China's sales of e-cigarettes into the U.S. market generate an estimated $3.5 billion annually. And yet, despite all of this, despite the 1,000% increase in teen usage of these illegal e-cigarettes, we've seen little to no civil enforcement action taken by the Consumer Protection Branch of the Department of Justice against these large Chinese importers. Mr. Rao, I'd like to know why. Why is that?
Senator, we take very seriously the vast, widespread prevalence of the products that you've described, and we have been working with our law enforcement partners, including the U.S. Marshals Service, on looking at seizures of these products. There was a seizure.
Hey, how many enforcement actions have you brought?
Senator, we've brought multiple enforcement actions, civil injunctive enforcement actions, and again, we're also looking at the use of criminal tools as well as other authorities, including the PACT Act.
Okay. And some of those authorities that the department has access to, or that the U.S. government has access to, are civil, and others are criminal. So I have to ask the question. I'll ask it to you, since no one from ATF is here. Why is it that ATF is not bringing more criminal enforcement actions against the large Chinese importers? I mean, are they too busy revoking the licenses of federal firearms licensees based on paperwork violations? So much so that they've chosen to ignore those who are selling illegal Chinese e-cigarettes to minors?
Senator, we're working closely with the ATF on the use of the PACT Act. We are considering all available options under that statute, and we are, we're committed to working with them to try to make additional headway in this area.
Okay, can you grasp my concern here, which is that when we set up this very large net, a net, you might call it a dam, a barrier to entry that affects U.S. companies trying to comply with the law, and then you subject them to a lengthy licensing process. Then they have to wait for years while getting their products licensed. Then you have Chinese manufacturers not making any effort to comply with that law, not even making an effort to apply for approval. When those are flooding the market, and the U.S. manufacturers trying to comply with the law get nowhere, can you understand why that's a problem?
Senator, this is an extremely complex and rapidly evolving area, and it is challenging at a number of levels. And again, that's why we are eager to continue the work with our law enforcement partners to try to address this going forward.
Okay. Well, I hope they'll deal with it, and by, among other things, bring in enforcement actions, but also I hope that the folks at FDA can clear the backlog. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator DeLeese. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing and for your longstanding commitment to stopping nicotine addiction and tobacco use, particularly among our children. This cause is a longstanding one for me. I helped lead attorneys general in the 1990s to sue Big Tobacco and win a major settlement. And progress has been made, but obviously not enough progress. And this hearing, I hope, will advance the cause of preventing vaping, use of e-cigarettes, particularly flavored e-cigarettes, and bolster enforcement, which has been sadly lacking by the federal government, lagging and lacking. Last week, the FDA rescinded its marketing denial orders issued to Juul Labs. This rescission means that Juul's products will remain on the market while the FDA continues its review of Juul's products. I'm concerned that the FDA's rescission will cause a surge in illegal e-cigarettes to be sold and used by vulnerable populations and fueling the youth vaping epidemic. I understand the FDA is in the midst of its review, but leaving these products on the market when they have not met statutory health standards is simply unacceptable and dangerous. As chair of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation, I released a report in February finding that the regulatory efforts of the FDA, including extensions of compliance deadlines and prioritizing enforcement of certain types of e-cigarette products, have failed to curtail unauthorized e-cigarette products and prevent youth usage. That is just one example of what we found in our investigation on the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, and that was set forth in the report. Obviously, I don't have enough time even to scratch the surface of the report that we produced. But I want to ask you, Dr. King, what evidence does the FDA have to allow these products to remain on the market? Aren't you concerned that this action will increase the use of Juul products, even though the FDA has yet to complete its review? How can you leave them on the market?
As a scientist myself, I'm committed to following the science. And when I took this job, I vowed that, and I'm continuing it now, and that includes this review. As was noted in the release, we're doing a full substantive review of the entire application, and I'll note that unless a product has authorization, it's not on the market legally, and therefore any product that does not have authorization is at risk of enforcement. And I can't comment on specifics of any individual product, but we have an important paradigm in place. We've got to prioritize our resources accordingly, but we are monitoring the use of products, including those that are appealing to kids.
What are you doing to mitigate the harms that Juul is causing while you complete your review?
Well, part of it is the scientific review, to make sure that we're doing a robust review of the evidence, including the toxicologic risks and various other risks of the population as a whole. And concurrent to that, we're working on enforcement, and we're taking action.
When will your review be done?
I can't comment on the specifics of an application, but I can tell you that we're working as tirelessly as possible.
Well, that's the story of federal enforcement here, and you're not the one who should be bearing the brunt of the blame necessarily, but the history is a long one, and it's filled with delay and procrastination, failure to provide sufficient enforcement in a timely way. Let me ask you, Mr. Rao, what provisions are you making for Attorney General enforcement as part of this renewed effort?
Senator, I think as part of what we're looking to do going forward is working with our federal law enforcement partners to identify potential gaps or potential areas in which additional support may be useful. And as part of the regular discussions that we're going to be having, we'll certainly look to identify ways in which other agencies, whether attorney generals, whether state law enforcement, as Senator Ossoff mentioned earlier. I think again, it's a difficult issue, and it requires an all-of-government approach. And so we would certainly welcome opportunities to engage with other law enforcement partners, state and local.
Thank you. My time has expired. I thank you both for your commitment to this cause. I think our view and our role in the Congress is to provide additional impetus and momentum. It's not personal. I respect your commitment and your credentials, your lifelong work in this area, but I think the federal government has continued to be less vigorous than it should be. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Blumenthal. We're going to wrap up the panel. Senator Tillis has a question. I have one before. I've listened carefully, Mr. Rao, to your description of this issue that we're considering today. You have said, and I quote, "It is the highest priority of the U.S. Department of Justice." You have said that it's an urgent issue. You have said we need a very aggressive approach. You said we need to use all available tools. So I'd like to issue a specific challenge to you. We're going to give you the address of the store that has the products here. And it's in Silver Spring, Maryland, within 1 mile of FDA headquarters. You have announced this new enforcement agency team that includes almost every law enforcement agency of our federal government. I hate to pick on one store, but I want you to prove to me that it is urgent. You're going to use all available tools and its highest priorities. We know that they are selling illegal products to children. We know that's happening, and it's happening across this country. So now I'm going to find out. This agency task force that has all the law enforcement agency of the federal government is on the case. My crack investigators here found this store, and they found what they're selling to be illegal. Now, what are you going to do about it? What is U.S. Department of Justice going to do about it? Anything? I hope you'll report back to the committee what you decide. Do you want to say something? You're welcome to.
Again, I want to stress the department's commitment to this issue and to pursuing enforcement without fear or favor, where the facts lead and where the law supports.
And I will tell you, my investigative team here will be happy to work with you to identify the exact address of this store, which I'm not going to read into the record, but we'll give it to you so that we'll see what happens. A week or two from now, we'll check on the store and see how they're doing. We'll see what the highest priority of the Department of Justice means. Senator Tillis?
Yeah, you may be able to stop into that Exxon that Senator Cornyn's staff went to also. I'm looking at, first off, Dr. King, it's very clear to me that you're data-driven, science-driven, and I appreciate that. I'm trying to get to common sense-driven here, and you've got to operate within the context of the rules that we set here in Congress. I understand that, and I'm not going to attack you, but it just seems to me that you couldn't throw a rock and not hit something like you see in Maryland. Right down here, I know there's the Exxon right down here. You may have gotten it there. Geek Bar was formed in China in 2015. They're responsible for this one that has advertising. It says OMG Blow Pop. Oh, that's not focused on kids at all, right? The language, the marketing on the box. Now, they're in China. This one, however, is designed in the United States and manufactured in China. It's called EB Design. They're a business apparently headquartered in California. Why aren't we going after them if they're contracting to get a product made in China that has labeled on it, just sell it where it's legal in the United States, if in fact it's illegal throughout the United States? Why aren't we at least able to go after any U.S.-based companies that are involved in this supply chain that's poisoning our kids?
So I'll reinforce that we have taken action against that company. It's actually a progeny from the Elf Bar product. We've done a series of blitzes since last April on a monthly basis, where we have issued warning letters to not only the retailers, but also enhanced with civil money penalties. And to your point around the data, that's what we're following. We know Elf Bar and those progeny products are the most commonly used product among kids, and that's where we prioritize the resources. I do want to make it clear, though, when we follow the science, that the top 2 brands used among kids are Chinese manufacturers, but number 3 and 4 are domestic. And so it's important that we follow the science, and we'll continue to have a nimble approach to our enforcement.
And what's the mix in those 4 then, as a stratification of their market share? The top 2 are from China, the other 2 are from the U.S. What's the mix?
Higher market share is the U.S. based companies, and a higher prominence among youth in terms of use is the Chinese based.
Thank you.
It's my understanding that you have a history of finding retailers but not manufacturers. Is that true?
We have initiated the first civil money penalties against manufacturers within the past year, and I'm hopeful we'll continue that in the future.
I hope so too, because I not only want to go after this store, but I'd like to go after the product manufacturers that fill their shelves.
I agree completely. Comprehensive approach is key. Agree completely.
I want to thank this first panel for gathering, and Dr. King and Mr. Rao. We're going to be back in touch with you to see if you're using all available tools to put these people out of business. Thank you very much. We're going to set up for the second panel.
Grab some coffee. Caffeine, not nicotine.
Let me read briefly the biographies of the second panel. Yolanda Richardson is President and CEO of the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, organization that has fought for over 25 years to protect kids and save lives by working to reduce tobacco use. David Spross, Executive Director of the National Association of Tobacco Outlets, a national trade association of tobacco retailers. Tony Aboud, Executive Director of the Vapor Technology Association, a national trade association dedicated to protecting vaping and alternative nicotine products industry. Dr. Suzanne Wally, Chief of the Division of Hospital Medicine at Children's National Hospital. She's an expert on the prevention of youth tobacco use and tobacco-related disease, has served as chair of the American Academy of Pediatrics section on nicotine and tobacco prevention and treatment. And Josie Shapiro, a high school student from Seattle, Washington. She's fought nicotine addiction after picking up vaping as a teenager. I'd also like to note for the record that we invited e-cigarette manufacturers Altria, R.J. Reynolds, Japan Tobacco International, and Miracle Shenzhen Technology to send representatives to testify at the hearing. None of them agreed to do so. So if I ask all the 5 witnesses to stand to be administered the oath, raise your right hand. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Let the record reflect that all 5 have answered in the affirmative. And Ms. Richardson, you have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you so much, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Tillis, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. I am Yolanda Richardson, and I'm President and CEO of the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. The campaign is the leading advocacy organization working to reduce tobacco use and its deadly consequences in the United States and around the world. The campaign was and is a strong advocate for the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, which was the landmark legislation that gave FDA the authority to regulate tobacco products. One of the most important tools that Congress gave FDA was the authority to conduct pre-market reviews of new tobacco products before they can be legally sold. Because of the Tobacco Control Act, decisions about which new products enter the market are no longer supposed to be made by tobacco manufacturers based on economic considerations, but rather ultimately made by FDA based on the need to protect public health after a careful review of the scientific evidence. Unfortunately, as you've heard this morning, pre-market review has not been effectively applied to e-cigarettes. FDA failed to assert its regulatory authority over e-cigarettes until a substantial e-cigarette market had already formed and e-cigarettes had already become the most popular tobacco product among youth. FDA then further delayed implementation of the pre-market review requirements of e-cigarettes, allowing these markets to remain on the market for years. Only when the campaign and other public health groups successfully challenged the delay did FDA initiate pre-market review process in 2020, years after these products were already on the market illegally. Now that pre-market review has started, we are encouraged that the FDA has appropriately applied the public health standard as intended by the Tobacco Control Act. We agree with FDA's determination that flavored products should not be permitted because they increase the appeal and use of e-cigarettes by youth. Yet, as we've noted this morning, the process has been slow, and several e-cigarette companies have flooded FDA with pre-market applications for millions of products, gumming up the process. The result, thousands of e-cigarettes are still under review, and there appears to be an unstated policy of not taking enforcement action against products with pending applications, including flavored e-cigarettes. The large number of unauthorized e-cigarettes on the market continue to present risks to public health. These products are highly addictive, can expose users to harmful substances, and have consistently been shown to appeal to youth. Appealing flavors and addictive levels of nicotine is a dangerous combination, which is why the FDA has rejected applications for millions of flavored e-cigarettes. Over the past year, the FDA has taken some important enforcement actions, but the current level of enforcement activity has not proven to be sufficient. More and stronger enforcement action is needed. The campaign and 77 other organizations recently sent a letter to FDA, the Department of Justice, and the Customs and Border Protection, urging them to make several changes. I will quickly highlight for you some of the changes that we proposed. First, the FDA must seek greater monetary penalties. FDA has been seeking penalties of only about $20,000, which is too low to serve as a deterrent. Second, the Department of Justice must prioritize tobacco product enforcement and act more quickly and aggressively when violations are found. Despite widespread noncompliance, DOJ has sought injunctions against only 7 manufacturers to date. Third, Customs and Borders Protection and FDA must prioritize and stop illegal importation of unauthorized products, many of the products you discussed earlier in the day that are coming in from outside of the United States. Fourth, the enforcement action must be brought against all parties in the supply chain, from manufacturers to wholesalers and distributors down to retailers. Fifth, FDA must end the broad exercise of enforcement discretion for products with a pending application. These products are no more legal than products for which no application was ever filed. And lastly, FDA must complete its review of e-cigarettes. FDA needs to move quickly to a true pre-market review process where products are reviewed prior to entering the market, rather than the current post-market review. We welcome this week's announcement about the creation of the multi-agency task force, a whole-of-government approach. This could be important, but it must be immediately followed with concrete and comprehensive enforcement actions. Federal agencies should also coordinate closely with states and localities on enforcement where appropriate. Pre-market review has great potential to reduce youth e-cigarettes, but without adequate enforcement, companies will continue to flout FDA requirements and put young people at risk. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Mr. Spross, did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did, Senator.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Tillis, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today. I am David Spross, and I serve as the Executive Director of the National Association of Tobacco Outlets, a national retail trade association that represents more than 66,000 retail stores throughout the country. At the outset, I want to clearly affirm our strong support for a well-functioning regulatory system in which FDA oversight leads to accelerated reductions in underage use and into tobacco-related harm. NATO and our members are invested in this system and in these goals. Illicit markets are a major threat to that goal, and thus a threat to the responsible retail community, committing to operating within, not outside, the legal system. NATO members take compliance seriously. Our members include licensed retailers who age verify their customers to prevent sales to minors. We have also been regularly informing our memberships of the brands FDA has targeted in its warning letters and other enforcement actions to ensure our members know in detail what products FDA is taking action against. Today's hearing addresses a very important topic. The marketplace is overrun by illicit and unregulated products, the vast majority of which are flavored vapor products made in China. To date, we have seen piecemeal enforcement that often ignores the most egregious actors. The task force announced this week is a good start. For it to be successful, the task force should use the full range of enforcement tools it has, particularly focused on the worst offenders, the largest manufacturers and distributors of these illicit products. With more aggressive enforcement action, we believe order can be restored to this marketplace. An effective regulatory system also requires a more coherent compliance framework that clearly communicates FDA's enforcement priorities. That is, the products it wants immediately removed and the products that can remain on the market. That information is critical to helping address the marketplace chaos we see every day. FDA has said that only 23 authorized vapor products are legal. But we also understand that FDA is not currently prioritizing enforcement against vapor products that have fully complied with its 2016 deeming rule and that have filed timely PMTA applications, which remain pending before the agency. FDA has repeatedly acknowledged that the removal of products pending PMTA review would stimulate illicit market activity and take potentially reduced harm products away from smokers. Simply put, NATO members who are seeking to abide by the law need greater clarity from the FDA. In addition, we believe FDA must reform its PMTA process. In our view, the process has fallen short of its intended purpose, and that is why we've seen a flourishing illicit market. To date, FDA has only authorized a small handful of small smoke-free products, despite millions of adult consumers seeking better alternatives to smoking. As FDA and Dr. King have acknowledged, smoke-free products are much less harmful than cigarettes for smokers who want to switch. But with so few FDA-authorized choices, consumer demand is now being met by Chinese companies that want the FDA's regulatory system to fail. Authorizing more products will help build a well-regulated market. In closing, NATO strongly supports solutions that reduce underage use and deliver on tobacco harm reduction. We look forward to working with the FDA, the task force, and this committee to address these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Spross. Mr. Aboud.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Tillis, and members of the committee for allowing me to testify today and answer your questions on a topic that is crucial to our public health. I hope that my opening statement and responses to your questions will inform a balanced conversation about tobacco policy in the United States that is rooted in the science on e-cigarettes. My name is Tony Aboud, and I am the Executive Director of the Vapor Technology Association. VTA is a trade association that protects and promotes a vibrant U.S. vapor industry with companies at every level of the distribution chain, including manufacturers, distributors, suppliers, and mom-and-pop retailers. Discussions like the one we are having today are critical to our members throughout the country in informing our efforts and our engagement with the esteemed members of this committee. I hope I can serve as a useful and important resource for you all. Let us begin with the fact that youth vaping in the United States has dramatically resolved from the peak of the Juul epidemic in 2019. Since then, youth vaping has plummeted 61%, largely due to the common sense federal law raising the age to buy tobacco products to 21, a law that VTA championed with the White House and with Congress. According to the CDC's National Youth Tobacco Survey, the youth vaping rate now sits at the lowest level in more than a decade, before e-cigarettes were even regulated by the FDA. Even better, now only 4.4% of youth use e-cigarettes regularly, and even fewer use them daily. Interestingly, in that same CDC survey, youth have consistently reported that flavors are not the reason they first try an e-cigarette or the reason they currently use e-cigarettes. Even more interesting, the dramatic rise in flavored disposable vaping products since 2019 in this country has corresponded with that dramatic decline in youth vaping. But as dramatic as the decline in youth vaping has been, VTA has not been satisfied and has been advocating on the Hill for serious, common-sense marketing and access restrictions to further protect youth from e-cigarettes. Why is this important? In February, Dr. Nancy Rigotti of Harvard Medical School wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine, quote, "It is now time for the medical community to add e-cigarettes to the smoking cessation toolkit. U.S. public health agencies and medical societies should reconsider their cautious positions on e-cigarettes for smoking cessation. The evidence has brought e-cigarettes to a tipping point. The burden of tobacco-related disease is too big for potential solutions such as e-cigarettes to be ignored." Further, last fall, the Medical University of South Carolina published the largest clinical trial in the United States, covering 4 years and 11 cities, finding that e-cigarettes help people quit smoking better than the FDA-approved medicines on the market, even if the individuals had no intention of quitting. In other words, the mere availability of these vaping products caused them to quit smoking. Another study by Abigail Freeman from Yale showed that flavored e-cigarette restrictions result in a direct increase in cigarette sales in those jurisdictions which have limited them. The authors warned any perceived public health benefits of reducing flavored e-cigarettes may be offset by the public health costs from e-cigarette sales. The reason we are having this enforcement discussion today is because U.S. tobacco regulation in the hands of this FDA is broken. The FDA was supposed to implement the Tobacco Control Act to allow Americans access to alternatives to cigarettes that are less harmful. Instead, the FDA has done the exact opposite. It has misused its power to impose a de facto ban on flavored vaping products without reviewing the science. Since passage of the Tobacco Control Act, the FDA has authorized 16,000 combustible tobacco products and only a handful of vaping products. In the past 2 years alone, this FDA has not authorized a single vaping product or nicotine pouch product like Zyn, but it has rushed 2,000 new combustible products, including 821 new cigarettes, to the market for Americans to smoke. The FDA has not done its job as a regulator, and now it wants more funding to enforce the very actions which federal courts have declared illegal and which are going for Supreme Court review. To be clear, the FDA has repeatedly stated that every single vaping product on the market is illegal, regardless of whether the company has a pending application. That means it is enforcing prohibition. I contend you can give it all the enforcement power in the world, but prohibition cannot be enforced. Instead of pursuing this failed regulatory policy, the FDA must reverse course, make harm reduction its North Star, and authorize a wide variety of products that are less harmful products, filling the market with flavored products which American adult consumers are clearly demanding is the only way to curb the illicit demand and give Americans what they need, what they want, and what the law was intended for them to have. Only then will 500,000 Americans who die from smoking every year have a regulated choice and a fighting chance. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I look forward to answering your questions and working with the committee going forward.
Thanks, Mr. Aboud. Dr. Wally.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Senator Tillis, and members of the committee. My name is Dr. Susan Wally, and I serve as the Division Chief of Hospital Medicine at Children's National Hospital here in Washington, D.C. I'm a pediatrician and an expert in adolescent tobacco use. I'm here today representing the American Academy of Pediatrics, an organization that represents 67,000 pediatrician members. E-cigarettes are addictive, and they are dangerous for children. Unfortunately, we are here today because we're not doing enough to protect our youth from a tobacco industry intent on profiting off the use of these harmful and addictive products among children. Contrary to what you have heard today from the tobacco industry, over 2 million children and adolescents currently use e-cigarettes. The tobacco epidemic is not over. While down from its peak a few years ago, it is still a shockingly and unacceptably high number. What's more, over a quarter of youth e-cigarette users use the products every day. One of the primary reasons, as you have heard, children are attracted to e-cigarettes is the sweet fruit, candy, and mint flavors they come in. The flavors smell and taste great, and they mask the harshness of tobacco. These products are also often marketed with packaging that resembles candy and snack food. As a pediatrician, I see all too frequently how nicotine addiction takes hold in teenage patients who vape e-cigarettes. The adolescent brain is more susceptible to nicotine addiction, so symptoms of dependence can appear in days to weeks of first experimentation with e-cigarette use. When the brain does not get the nicotine it craves, teens experience unpleasant withdrawal symptoms such as irritability and anxiety, which leads to continued use. For many young people, this is not just sporadic use, but consistent, frequent, and dependent use. Unfortunately, the trusted adults that teens usually rely on, parents, teachers, and pediatricians like myself, have limited options to assist in their quitting. I am certified in nicotine and tobacco treatment, which means I have special training on how to help people, including children, quit using tobacco products. But pediatricians have found that helping adolescents stop using e-cigarettes is exceedingly difficult due to the high level of nicotine in these products, targeted marketing, and easy access. Many of these children are very addicted, and we have limited effective tools in our toolbox to help them because youth tobacco cessation treatment, particularly for e-cigarettes, has had limited research funding. So our best strategy to avoid youth nicotine addiction is to prevent the use of any tobacco products in the first place. And we know the most effective way to stop youth e-cigarette use is to get all flavored tobacco products off the market. This is where we need the Food and Drug Administration's help. To date, as you have heard, FDA has reviewed millions of e-cigarette applications and has appropriately rejected the vast majority of them. It is determined that no e-cigarettes that are flavored are appropriate for the protection of public health. FDA has authorized only 23 e-cigarette products. These 23 products are sold under only 3 brands, and none of these products come in a flavor other than tobacco. These are the only products that are allowed to be legally sold in the United States. But yet, thousands of flavored e-cigarettes make their way to the hands of children every day, just like, and Senator Tillis, I think we shopped at the same place, this OMG Blow Pop e-cigarette that I purchased within walking distance of a school. Today, 90% of youth e-cigarette users report using a flavored product, despite none of them being authorized by the FDA. Simply put, this is unacceptable. The solution should start where the problem starts, with the tobacco industry and its supply chain. Manufacturers should end the production of unauthorized e-cigarettes. Distributors should stop distributing them. Retailers like vape shops and convenience stores should stop selling them to the public, where they ultimately lie in the hands of children. But history has taught us that the tobacco industry and its partners are unlikely to do the right thing on its own. That's why we need the federal government to get these illegal products off the market. We appreciate that the FDA recently stepped up enforcement and is creating a multi-agency task force with law enforcement partners to expand e-cigarette enforcement. Congress can also help by ensuring these enforcement efforts have sufficient funding. We really need every relevant partner to step up and make this a priority. Youth e-cigarette use is still a very real problem, but it is a solvable problem and we have solutions. We just need the will to implement these solutions. America's pediatricians look forward to working with you to ensure that our children grow up without the harms of tobacco products. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Wally. Ms. Shapiro.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Josephine Shapiro. I am a high school senior from Seattle, Washington, and I'm addicted to nicotine because of e-cigarettes. I grew up hating cigarettes and other commercial tobacco products. I would cough as I walked by smokers, trying to alert them of the harm that they're doing to their bodies. I never thought I would touch a cigarette or any other tobacco product. As early as middle school, this started to change. My friends started vaping in 7th grade. They thought vapes were harmless because of the fun flavors and colorful packaging. They wanted to be cool like the pretty girls they saw vaping on social media, but they didn't realize they were becoming addicted. Vaping soon started to take over their lives. They would leave class early to vape in the bathrooms or anywhere else they could get away with it. It's easy to hide these products in your sock or your bra, which makes it difficult for teachers or parents to know when kids are vaping. In 9th grade, I began to hang out with a new group who used all sorts of e-cigarettes. The more I hung out with these people, the more vaping became normal to me, and I had to try it. The first flavor I tried was blueberry ice, but I tried pretty much every flavor my friends had. I thought I was just enjoying the flavors, but soon my 14-year-old brain craved the nicotine more and more. I promised myself I wouldn't buy my own vape because I wasn't addicted if I was just hitting my friends, right? It wasn't long before I broke that promise to myself. I was already addicted, and little did I know it was about to get worse. These products are easy to get. You can ask someone older for you to buy it off a friend, or go to a store where they don't ID you. Once I had my own vape, I would leave class to vape in the bathrooms with my friends. I would get invited to lunch so people could hit my vape, and all of a sudden, my entire circle was centered around vaping. The hold nicotine had on my young mind was intense and scary. I felt completely out of control, helpless, and alone, even though I knew I wasn't. Vaping affected my mood, my ability to catch my breath, and even my skin. I couldn't spend quality time with my friends without thinking about when we were going to get our next hit. I really missed the times when we could have fun without the presence of nicotine. One of the saddest things about vaping and nicotine addiction is how it ruins relationships between friends and families. I can't tell you how many ways it impacted my friends, but let me tell you one example. One of my friends was so addicted she would say things like, "I'll just die at 20, whatever." I watched her isolate herself from the rest of her life, but as long as she had her vape, she said she was okay. Vaping for her was not just an addiction, it was her lifeline. We would skip class and activities to sit in her car and vape. Then the vapes turned into cigarettes. And then the cigarettes turned into other drugs. My story is still ongoing today. Our story is still ongoing today. As I look forward to all the wonderful things I have ahead of me, I'm still struggling to get over my nicotine addiction, and I blame it all on the blueberry ice vape. I've tried to quit vaping over and over again, but it's really, really hard. Everything in my life is a trigger. Hanging out with friends, driving my car, going to the bathroom, going into the convenience store. All of it makes me want to vape. Honestly, I haven't been able to stay clean for more than 2 months since I decided to quit. I feel terrible about it. My addiction consumes a lot of my life. It has impacts on my physical and mental health. It makes me feel like I am less than. But the reality is that my ambition and goals have been suppressed by an industry that profits from me and my peers. That's why I'm sharing my story today. I'm doing everything I can to prevent young people from ever starting to vape or use any tobacco product. My story is mine, but I also tell it to protect the new generations. I have 2 younger siblings, and imagining them with a blueberry ice vape breaks my heart. There are over 2 million kids who vape in the United States, and millions more will go through the same thing if we do nothing. From my perspective, we have to get rid of every single flavored e-cigarette. Until then, kids will continue to use these products, and they will continue to get addicted, just like me. Thank you.
Ms. Shapiro, thanks. It couldn't have been easy for you to decide to do this, but it's important that you did. To hear firsthand the story of what you've been facing makes a real difference. I mean, to all of us. Dr. King is still in the room. People representing the industry are still in the room. They need to listen very carefully to what you had to say. Stick with it. You can beat this. I know you can. You have enough determination to be here today, and we're cheering you on. Dr. Wally, what about this argument that vaping is a good way to stop tobacco use?
Thank you for the question, Senator Durbin. As a trained nicotine and tobacco specialist and a former medical director of a tobacco consult service, I understand the devastation of an adult who has been smoking for 50 years and has what we call like a 100-pack history, where they smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day for 50 years. And so no one would be more happy to see additional FDA-proven safe and effective smoking cessation therapies. The FDA has already approved safe and effective smoking cessation therapies. And this is crucial that we as a medical community and as a society make sure that we provide the access to those safe and effective FDA-approved smoking cessation therapies.
So, Mr. Abood, when you listen to Ms. Shapiro talk about her addiction, what do you think as a head of the Association for Vaping?
Well, first of all, Senator, I think about her as the parent of 3 teens and young adults. These are not new issues for me, for my family, for any parents in the United States.
Are your kids vaping?
Some of them do vape, yeah. And we talk about this issue like we do all the other issues that teens have to struggle with.
Do you encourage them to stop?
Of course we do. Of course we encourage them to stop.
Doesn't that tell the whole story here? You don't want your own kids doing this. Why do we want any kids doing this?
We don't want any kids doing this. This is why we raised the age to 21, and we advocated for that. That's why we made this product illegal. That's also why we work hard at doing the other things making more common sense regulations to make sure that these products don't get into their hands.
Mr.
Increasing
Sprouse, your retailers, what do they think about this product? Do they just assume that since it's going to be legally sold in the United States or apparent legally sold, they have no moral obligation to the kids that are buying them?
Quite the opposite, Senator. We take a zero tolerance policy in terms of ensuring that our retailers are trained to prevent sales to youth, whether that be through we-card access or using the available tools that are out there through the FDA
Do your
website.
retailers sell flavored products?
They do, and I would say, like I said in my statement, yes, we've communicated the 23 products that are that have been granted marketing granted orders, but we also, as I referenced, there's been products that have timely filed PMTAs according to the statutory deadlines, and those products are not receiving the enforcement right now.
Mr. Sprouse, I don't know if you were here earlier, Mr. Aboud as well. We established that applying for the PMTA is one thing, but there's a burden of proof by the manufacturers as to the safety of their products. And that is the one element that's clearly not being met by many of the products that are on sale across America today. Do you understand that distinction?
I do. I would also add, just in terms of if you can't sell it through licensed, regulated retail shops where you're age verifying to prevent youth from purchasing the products, it will go into the illicit market. And so, quite frankly, as I said in my statement, authorizations are the key to this. There's 250,000 applications currently before the FDA that have been sitting there in some cases more than 4 years, and the time is now.
Do you understand the law says that they'll continue to sit there until the manufacturer meets a burden of proof?
Yes.
You can't go selling those in the meantime, assuming that they've proven something that they haven't proven. Do you understand that distinction?
I do, yeah.
Mr. Aboud, what about that? I mean, you said this is prohibition. Is it prohibition to say you have the burden of proof that your product is safe for public health before it can be sold in the United States?
Yeah, the problem, of course, Senator, is the fact that the FDA created the regulations. They set the deadlines for complying with the regulations. They asked for and received funding from this body for enforcing those regulations. They changed the rules of the regulations and the requirements after applications were submitted, and they did so in a manner that did not involve any sort of public policy oversight. The net result was the mass removal of products from the marketplace, and which, of course, spawned this illicit marketplace.
The original law, the Tobacco Control Act, puts a burden of proof on the manufacturer to prove that their product is safe for public health. Do you understand that responsibility?
I do. I do.
And do you disagree with that? Do you think that's not the case?
But manufacturers need to know from the FDA what is required to make that proof. And the Reagan-Udall Foundation, which was an independent body that was asked for by the commissioner, said that the agency has not told companies what is required to prove APPH or how they are interpreting it. And instead of responding to that criticism, the FDA waited 1 year and said nothing. They are not telling manufacturers what they need to do to comply, and they're not even telling retailers what products they're even reviewing, much less how they're reviewing them.
23 of those manufacturers have been approved, so obviously they knew what they needed to comply.
Well, that's a little bit of a stretch, Senator, only because 23 is really basically only 8 devices, and only 5 of them are on the market today. That's not enough for 30 million smokers. That is not enough of options.
I think the bottom line is, if you want to discourage your own children from using vaping products, we ought to understand the danger of that product, and I think you inherently do. Most parents would. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to, I think it related to a question that you asked Dr. Wiley, but part of what we don't want to do is to remove options that are safer alternatives to an activity that you as a physician, you wish they wouldn't even vape, right? But there's a reason why there are nicotine lozenges. There's a reason why there are nicotine pouches. They are providing people with off-ramps to habits that hopefully they can quit. It's how I quit last year, starting with pouch tobacco, actually starting with rough cut tobacco, moving to pouch spitless tobacco, then ultimately to a nicotine pouch, and now I'm, as of last September, I haven't touched it since. And Josie, I wish you the same. I know it's not going to be easy. But let's not forget that these are healthier alternatives in the hands of adults. What we're trying to do is remove it as an option, easily accessible option to children. We'll have a separate discussion maybe on another day about the ultimate disposition, but we shouldn't lose that. And Mr. Abood, when we see these shelves of products, and I guess Dr. Wiley, it was Senator Durbin's staff that went to the vape shop. I haven't been to one yet, but I will go. We're talking about an illegal product here. We're talking about something that shouldn't be on the shelves. So, Mr. Spross, could you just, for the record, could you submit communications from your association to your members that say, this is bad, don't do it, just evidence? You've already suggested that you're doing that, but that you're universally communicating to anybody that's associated or any other retailer. We'll ask the same of others. Now, they're saying this is bad, get it off the shelves. It's not only illegal, it's unhealthy. Can you submit that for the record?
Yeah, we communicate to our members anytime there's an enforcement action against products that are deemed illegal by the FDA.
Mr. Abood, your industry future rests on getting this right. And again, I've got to believe that you don't see your future as successfully marketing to kids. That is not a sustainable path for a credible, a legitimate business in the United States. Probably nowhere, but certainly not in the United States. So if you were waving a wand and you were Dr. King, or you were in charge of the federal government regulatory agencies, or you were a member of the U.S. Senate and wanted to fix this problem, what would your suggestion be? Number one, do you suggest that there is a problem? Is there a problem that needs to be fixed? That's the first question. Otherwise, it disqualifies the second one.
Yeah.
Is there a problem that exists with youth vaping and a vector to more dangerous outcomes?
There is definitely an issue that persists.
Now you get an opportunity to wave a wand. What should we do?
There's two, maybe three principal things that we do. The first is that we implement serious marketing and access restrictions, the kind that we've been meeting with members on the Hill about, and we've been recommending for years. Unfortunately, this body has typically only wanted to talk about banning flavors as if flavors was in itself the only thing about marketing. We know that youth are impacted by this issue. They say they are impacted and attracted to vaping for many other reasons other than vaping. Marketing, we can get to those concerns, we can get to access restrictions and do things that doesn't require removing all the products that adults are using. The second thing is, from an FDA perspective, I think we've clearly heard the testimony today. This is a hot mess right now, and there is no clear pathway out, particularly through this PMTA process. And you heard Director King say, well, we're going to try to resolve these applications, but we have to worry about litigation. Of course they do, because they put themselves in a box now where they have rejected en masse all flavored vaping applications. So they can't make any more decisions along those lines without worrying about what the Supreme Court thinks. But the answer is already in the Tobacco Control Act. They could implement a tobacco product standard. They can move on it aggressively. They could state what the products should and should not be in the products, how products should and should not be manufactured. They can lay out those standards that manufacturers can comply with. There won't be any black box questioning as to what happens when an application goes in. It won't take 4 or 5 years for an application to get resolved. And then we can move forward with an actual regulated market. But unless they make harm reduction their North Star, unless they say we believe in vaping products and we want to encourage them like they are doing in other countries, we are going to persist in having an illicit market. It will just be a purely black market, not sold through any of the legal or regulated, licensed, and tax-paying retailers and distributors that our entities represent.
Thank you.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Abood, the reason why you don't want your kids to vape is because of the health risk, correct?
What I want my kids is to be healthy. as healthy as possible. And when they're suffering from a variety of issues that many adolescents are dealing with, then we have to address those as parents.
Well, I think you've just answered my question. I have limited time, but I think the answer is yes. And the health risks are, number one, nicotine addiction. Number two, the substances that may be in the vaping material. We have no idea what they are when they come from China. They may be as harmful as the carcinogens in tobacco. So I respect you as a parent, also of 4 children, that you want your kids to be in good health, and vaping is bad for their health. And I also respect your criticisms of federal regulation. As the chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation, I released a report in February that documented the regulatory failures that have created the hot mess that we have right now. It's on us, the federal government, as well as on the vaping manufacturers. But what we documented was the missed opportunities by federal agencies to stem the tide of addiction. This years-long investigation highlighted the shameless marketing tactics of new e-cigarette companies like Puff Bar, the half measures by the FDA that allowed Puff Bar to build on the popularity and addiction that Juul caused, and the need for enhanced federal enforcement. Am I correct in believing that you would support additional resources and stronger regulation?
Senator, to the earlier point, I also don't want my kids drinking alcohol or using cannabis in flavors of all varieties. I know kids are going to try things and to do things. I don't try to base our national public health policies or my beliefs on those based upon what's
Well, let me break down the question. You were critical, very specifically, of the lack of resources. Let's just talk about resources. Would you support additional resources going to FDA and other enforcement agencies to better enforce restrictions on sales of vaping products?
I honestly don't think it's a resource issue. The FDA has had resources for years. They just haven't used them in a manner that's efficient and that is effective. For example, they use a lot of resources to go out and do retail inspections, and they talk about vape shops being a problem. What we found from their data is that the vape shops have the best compliance rate with respect to the underage sales to youth.
Well, I want to, just take this back to the manufacturers and the retailers of these products. Wouldn't you agree that they've marketed to kids?
I think there is some poor marketing, which is why we've been advocating for marketing restrictions in this country. But
well, the plain fact is
there's not enough resources.
They've taken a page from Big Tobacco's playbook. And
there are not enough resources to enforce a way out of this without other laws that can help put restrictions on that. Enforcing a prohibition is going to lead to simply a black market. It will not work. So
well, that's the same argument that was used about tobacco.
And
some of those restrictions have worked. Restrictions on marketing to kids.
No, we're fine with that.
It's no accident that
we're fine with that.
The vaping companies are buying. That the tobacco companies are buying the vaping manufacturers because they know how it's done. They can market in the way that they did with Joe Camel and the Marlboro Man to kids. That's Big Tobacco's playbook, and the vaping companies are using it relentlessly, purposefully, and tirelessly with the huge resources that they have now more than ever because the big tobacco companies are buying them.
And we'd love to work with you on marketing restrictions. That is something that has been important to us for a while. We just don't think more resources thrown at the FDA in its current makeup and with its current direction is an answer.
My time has expired, but I just make the point to you as a former Attorney General for 20 years. If you don't have resources, you don't have enforcement. Resources are absolutely necessary. It's the lifeblood of enforcement. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, and thanks to the panel. I want to thank Dr. Wally. Bringing science into this from the medical perspective is a critical element. Ms. Shapiro, thank you as well, stepping up and making clear the battle that you're fighting. You're going to win that battle. And you're coming here today as an act of courage personally and politically that makes a difference. I thank all the members of the panel. Ms. Richardson, I'm sorry we didn't be able to get into campaign for tobacco-free kids and the great work that's been done through that organization over the years. Mr. Spross, Mr. Aboud, thank you for joining us. We may have some written questions coming your way by Wednesday, June 19th, and if you could respond to them quickly, we would appreciate that. Senator Tillis, do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, just very briefly, thank you all for being here. And I believe that everybody wants to try and produce a good outcome for the threat that our youth faces. I can't imagine anybody on the panel would be pursuing others. I mentioned earlier that I think we have to have a broader discussion about vaping because it's now the delivery mechanism of choice for THC derivatives. And Dr. Wiley, I don't know if you've seen the research. I've spoken with behavioral health experts that say that we're seeing an increase in psychotic responses to so-called legal drugs. The Eastern Band of the Cherokee now are starting to sell THC products in North Carolina. I mentioned it in my opening comments. They're marketing things in their native tongue among a community that has a higher instance of substance abuse than the U.S. population as a whole. I don't know if these are healthy products or not, but I do know that when we're talking about vaping, we need to go beyond just nicotine delivery to a broader issue. And Josie, I'm sure that you know a lot of friends who moved off of nicotine to THC or to these other hybrids that they're creating. It's a broader problem that we need to fix. And Mr. Aboud, as I said earlier, your entire industry's future rest on getting it right. So we hope that you all can suggest to us things that we can do to come forward and address the fundamental issue and the longer-term threat of these practices happening in my own state of North Carolina. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Tillis.
Could I respond to that or no?
Very briefly.
Okay. Senator Tillis, I wanted to first start and just congratulate you on your quit journey because nicotine is highly addictive. In terms of your specific question about THC, we do know, of course, this is a panel to talk about tobacco, that there is significant co-use, and we certainly, in the American Academy of Pediatrics, have resources and strong concerns. Thank you.
Thanks very much to the panel and those who attended this important and historic hearing. Meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee stands adjourned.